Today's speakers are people that we're especially excited to hear from. It's really a kind of Creative Mornings DC all-star lineup. Each of these people has shared their talents and perspective with us before over the years. And today we're excited to hear how they're thinking about purpose in this context. For the sake of argument, I think we're going to go in order of appearance at Creative Mornings historically. So first, our first speaker joined us way back in September of 2014, which makes me want to cry. It's like, it just doesn't seem possible. She spoke appropriately on the subject of color. She's a DC icon, phenomenon, entrepreneur, and fine artist. Please help me welcome Maggie O'Neill. And let me get off the screen here.
Hello. Oh my gosh, this is hilarious and also awesome. Good morning. Cheers. I wish this was filled with something a little bit more exciting, but it's just coffee right now. Which at my talk, I had mimosas passed around because in true Irish fashion, it felt right to toast before I got started. But to Joel, the entire Creative Mornings team and community, I just wanted to begin with thank you, because I think that this is chicken soup for the soul. These are healthy, important conversations. And I think now more than anything, to feel connected and to feel a sense of community is more important than ever. For those of you who don't know me, I am an artist and a designer. I have a design firm called Swatch Room. We do hospitality design, so restaurants, nightclubs, hotels. And as you can imagine, that has been hit pretty significantly. I'm also a fine artist. I'm sitting in my studio, and it's meditative and it's therapeutic for me to make artwork. But when we talk about purpose, just like everybody else, I've had some time to marinate and to do some soul searching and get enraged after I watch the news and then figure out what does that mean. And I think because I'm such a social person and because I really do enjoy people, and the reason why I enjoy people is because I think God made us different by design, which is really a beautiful and very big thought if you think about it, to the extent that he's, or the universe, or whomever you think of as is the best artist. And by design, we all have this special sauce. We all have this very particular thing that we were put on this planet to either leave as a legacy or to affect in other people. And I sort of philosophically and dogmatically live my life like that, where I get excited to meet another person and in person, because I never know what that's going to provoke or what kind of relationship or exciting idea can come from that. And so to be without that, I know for many people, especially this community, is really tricky, if not depressing, if not isolating, and so on and so forth. And so I think my purpose, and as a professional and as a person, it's been something I've been thinking quite a bit about. And I don't know that pre-COVID or post-COVID it has actually changed. I think it's just thrown, I think like salt has been thrown on it. So it's like a flavor enhancer. I think that my purpose was always to work with color as a muse and a medium and to interact with people. But I think my purpose has always been to provoke someone's imagination. And if you think about your imagination as a beautiful original piece of artwork, no one else has it. Your imagination is like nobody else's, then that's by design. If you could provoke somebody else's imagination, you could spark amazing, amazing things. And I don't know that I knew that that was my purpose for immediately, when I came out of college and so on and so forth. I think I've grown into that, but I do believe that is my legacy. And I think that when you think very heady about the idea of what is someone's purpose, I think people can get really down on themselves because they think it has to be something that has some sort of professional application, which it doesn't. I don't believe it does. And I think that if you can distill down how you can provoke somebody else's imagination to feel better about something, to spark an idea, to change the way they're thinking about their immediate set of circumstances, it gives all of us a little bit more armor when it comes to having to deal with change and having to deal with creative problem solving and having to deal with adversity. And the conversations that are the most helpful for me right now, the most comforting, the most important, I think, are those like this, where my imagination is provoked. You know, in my professional life, I get to exercise that, but it's still work, it's still a business. And, you know, I think when we make a space where someone's entire, you know, imagination is engaged and they like have suspended reality for just a minute, you know, I've done my job, but I also feel like that is really what I was put on this earth to do. And when I can make a painting and I can trigger somebody to think about anything differently for that matter, let alone to cause them to think about what makes them a little bit more true to themselves, a little bit more of their own palette. And my idea about color theory is very much in line with, you know, provoking somebody's imagination and what my purpose is. You know, if we all put our best foot forward right now and contribute exactly who we are to creative problem solving, I mean, I have a lot of faith in the human spirit, and I have a lot of faith in the human condition that we are amazing problem solvers when we allow one another to actually bring their best self to the table. And I think that it's been humbling to think about all of the tools in which you'd actually maybe exercise the way that you know, your purpose exists in the world. And when they're taken away from you, how else do you actually communicate? And these Zoom calls, I mean, this is so strange. And also, thank God we have this medium to actually connect, and to, you know, to provoke each other. So I'm excited to hear from Morgan and Jason. I'm excited to get into the Q&A, but I believe that my purpose is to provoke your imagination, and I hope that I can continue to do that. I know I will continue to do that, and I'm finding new ways and connecting with people in all different parts of my industry to figure out how we come on the other side of this. Because I'm not scared of change. I don't think change is actually a problem. And if we take the fear out of it a little bit and lean into the fact that actually this could be a massive opportunity for us to all step in, to stop trying to be like one another and actually let each other's freak flag fly. I mean, Jesus Christ, this is why we're here, right? Is to actually put your best foot forward, your talent, your special sauce. And you never know what you could do for somebody else and what that could do for an entire community, or to problem solve big problems in the world. And so, you know, I'm grateful for this community, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to share my idea about at least what my purpose is. But I have a feeling that there's a lot of people out there, especially in this community, who have similar purpose to myself. And I don't stop provoking people's imagination, because it's the only commodity we have right now that is actually fuel to change what's going on.
Awesome. Let's give Maggie a big round of applause. I'm like a little bummed I have to like jump back in. I can't just like let that wash over me. That's what I was feeling like, just kind of sitting back and feeling that. So good to hear from you, Maggie, and I'm really excited to have some questions and hear more from you in a little bit. So we do want to keep moving though, and next up, we're lucky to hear from our next speaker, maybe for the first time, a little more extensively. I don't know if I've ever been able to properly convey this to him, but this person is my hero, who single-handedly saved our 4th birthday party 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago at the Howard Theater in March of 2017. Those of you who were there know. Those that weren't may not remember, but it snowed once in 2017 16, 17 that winter. And it was the day, it was in March, late March. It was the day of our birthday party. We're going to have it at Howard Theater, and the city shut down. And nobody could go anywhere. I mean, they could between us, but like, you know how DC is. So the speaker that we had planned, his flight was canceled, and he couldn't get into the city. Our musicians canceled, a bunch of our food canceled, and a lot of people really stepped up and made sure that we were able to put on a great event. But this person was supposed to walk in and warm us up with a couple stories, which we were really excited about. But he showed up, and I was like, "How many stories you got? Like, how long can you just be on stage?" And Unflappable just kind of like, "Cool, yeah, I'll just make it happen." He is a DC storyteller, a writer, a performer, has an amazing podcast called Flyest Fables that I really hope you check out. Please help me welcome Morgan Givens.
You can wave at me and let me know you can hear me. All right, cool. Again, my name is Morgan Givens, and I am a lot of things. I am a composite of a bunch of things in my life, but I'm also right now currently the creator of a hope punk fiction podcast called Flyest Fables. And it's a podcast I made specifically for young Black kids so that they can maintain the magic in the world and their innocence, right? So my purpose right now is expanding the realm of innocence for young Black kids. But before I get too far into that, I got to tell you what hope punk is. So hope punk is this term that was coined by Alexandra Rollins. They're an author, and hope punk exists at the nexus, between dystopian fiction and utopian fiction, because often fictions, they already at the end of a dystopian book, and they're like, man, tell a story. You look at utopian fiction, they're like, yo, things are great. Let's tell a story. It's about what we do to get to those points. It's about the choices we make, and internally about the things that are hard. It's about maintaining our own individual light in the face of darkness and recognizing light in others, because we have to understand the darkness first in ourselves and in our society. But this fits into my purpose because often, I look and I remember I'm a Black kid. I was a Black trans kid growing up. And oftentimes our innocence is taken from us so early. Sometimes our stories are only tragedy, and that is part of who we are, but it is not the entirety of who we are. And how do we create space for young Black kids to have the same type of innocence, to have the same white counterparts without viewing it through the lens of whiteness? I tell these stories, and it's all about these kids. And so, my thing, they deserve fairy tales too. They deserve happy endings too. And that's the whole point of my stories, because what I don't want us to do on accident is ignore what these young kids are going to face. It's to not tell them stories that show them that these paragons of virtue that we often hold up on movements, the King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, Ida B. Wells, those are all fantastic, wonderful people who did amazing. Often forget to acknowledge the people behind them, the countless people who banded together and lifted them up. And so within my podcast, the story starts with a young Black kid named Antoine, and he's running from some book. And when he goes into the book, he reads about a princess named Keisha, who is on a magical journey to save her mother and the entire kingdom of Orleans. And within the stories, I layer themes. So the external arc, Antoine's being bullied. He's running from his life. He does not know how to exist. He doesn't know if his place is here, but his place is here. And as young Black kids, they are often told, society tells us all the time, there is no place for you here. There is no room for you here. There is no room for you to breathe and be. That tell them there is, that your existence is meaningful because you exist, that you are here because you should be here, and you are important because of your inherent, just because you're you. You ain't got to provide nothing to the world. You ain't got to prove nothing to the world, but you deserve to exist, and you deserve to exist in the full complexity of your humanity. And so I write these stories because I want to create and hold the space for continued innocence for young Black kids. And so in the story, Antoine is dealing with same stuff, some of the stuff I dealt with as a kid, being bullied. What do you do as a kid when you're bullied? How do you know how to talk to your parents? How do your parents know how to talk to you? How do we create the space where we can have connections and conversation between children and their parents? And so parents can really understand, and I'm saying this from the vision of a child, okay? I'm thinking of this from the perspective of a child, because I'm gonna be real, I ain't got no kids. I got a little nephew, but from the perspective of a child, I think about how I did not know how to express my feelings. And so it's like, how do we show young people it's okay to express those feelings while also showing their parents it's okay too? Because intergenerational trauma is real. It is not a thing that just came from nowhere. And so I want young Black kids to know that their feelings are valid, because the world can make us hard. And there are things that we have to do to survive in this world, but there should be safe spaces for all of these kids, even if it's in their home, even if it's in their imagination. There are places they can fly and be free. And my purpose right now is to create that. And, I'm only 33. That's a part of my purpose. Who knows how this will continue to migrate and grow. But I want to create a place for them not only to maintain their innocence, but them to continue to believe in the possibilities of what is possible. Because the world tells us everything is impossible. They say to us, we can't do that. They say, you want universal basic income? You can't have that. Yes, we can. They tell us, you can't have health insurance that's just for you. Yes, we can. But we have to remember that, because as we grow older, we're inundated with everything the world tells us we cannot do, and we lose that vision of childhood we remember, when our horizons were so vast and big and expansive. So how do we remember that in ourselves? How do we create that for ourselves, so that when we look at something that we believe is impossible, we can look to our neighbor and say, you got me, I got you, let's do this. Because that's the only way we're ever going to really accomplish everything, because where we are at this point in the world, these things, and these are very real divisions. I'm not saying these divisions aren't real. They come from real places. They come from real history. They come from real hatred. And we have to acknowledge that, so that we can actually grow and move forward together. And so I create stories that show young Black kids how to build those bridges across the community, how to understand the frameworks of power without talking specifically about power. Because in these podcasts, in these fables that I tell for them, we are exploring colonialism. We are exploring white supremacy. We are exploring, and the guys are doing it as young people fighting for what they believe is right. We are doing it so that when they grow older and they look back on these stories, the framework for a framework for contextualizing the world is already there. And I wonder often where we had that framework and that knowledge of understanding, that base knowledge, before we grew up. Look back, like, this might be ahead of my time right now, but when I'm older and I look back, I'll be like, oh, dang, the appraisers, who are the bad guys in my book, they're complicated bad guys. The appraisers, wow, that's imperialism. I see how they fought against that within the book, how they banded together. We can do that too. All the things that we need to do to survive is possible. Because at a certain point, this is going to sound cliche and corny. We have to, here's what I'm going to say. You know how we're often like, man, America put a man on the moon. Okay, sure, all right, we did. But at some point, we have to talk about mankind putting someone on. What we have to do to get there, I don't have all the answers. But we cannot survive as a species until we begin looking at our world and seeing mankind. Because I read, something about astronauts and how I think it's called the overseeing effect. When they go into outer space and they're staring down at the world and they're staring down at the planet and all of humankind, suddenly they no longer see the divisions. They talk about coming back on Earth and seeing humans, and they get frustrated by the things that we do, by the ways we try to protect ourselves. Like, these are defense mechanisms. These are oftentimes us acting out of fear. Where does that fear come from? And who stokes our fear? Who stokes it, and for what purpose? What do they gain? And so I try to create stories and fables where young Black kids can be free. There's music, there's song. It ain't talking about the hardships of being Black. It's talking about being bullied. But you're a Black kid getting bullied. It's different. There are tweaks, there are twerks, there are things that our parents talk to us about. But I want it to be in the context that this is not about the quote unquote the Black American tragedy, because we're not a tragedy. We are not a tragedy. but it is about recognizing our history, understanding the pain of our history, the intergenerational pain within our history, how we can untangle that, and how we do it through story. And so my purpose often has been creating the space that I needed as a child and create can return to as they grow older. Things, and it's going to hurt, and they're going to want to know what to do. But what if they already kind of know? What if they have something to start from and they can look to their parents and say, what is this? How do we get through this? How do we foster conversations within families, within Black families? And so that's what I try to do with Fly as Fables. My purpose right now is creating and holding space for young Black kids. My purpose right now is preserving, doing what I can to preserve the innocence of young Black and them. And have a moment where the outside world, they just have a break. They just have a break where they can breathe and close their eyes and hear music and see magic. That is what I do. That is my purpose. I'm not quite sure where I am on time, so I'm gonna go ahead and chill out right. Yeah, I guess I would just implore us the expanses of childhood. Remember the reaches of our imaginations. Remember who was possible and what we know is possible before they told us it was not. And yeah, I think that's it for me. I hope y'all have a great morning, and I really appreciate y'all having me.
Thank you, Morgan. Everybody, let's give Morgan a big round of applause. I'm going to power through it, but really happy that after 3 years we finally got a chance to hear more from Morgan. Waiting for that, and it means a lot to me, and I think everybody in the community. So moving on, and then we'll get to some questions. So be thinking of running the anchor leg today is a prolific author. You may know Miles Morales' Spider-Man, the Track series of books, Long Way Down, and the newly released Stamped Racism, Anti-Racism. He was also recently named, this is big, recently named the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature. And please help me welcome Jason Reynolds.
So weird, right? First, I just want to say thank you to Joel and the whole Creative Mornings team. Shouts to the homie Raquel. Shouts to the homie Mauricio. It's good to see everybody. Thanks to Maggie. Morgan, why we ain't never met, bro? You know what I'm saying? Like, crib, you know what I mean? We have to chop it up.
Done. Bet.
Yeah, we're working in the same space. It's interesting because I think when I was thinking about what to say, I was like, man, imagination, so that's out. Morgan talking about Black kids, that's out. And that's pretty much my whole life. You know what I mean? That being said, I will say this. When I was a kid, the idea of purpose was so stressful. I grew up in a household with a mother who studied Eastern philosophy, Eastern spiritual practices. And so it was this interesting sort of hodgepodge of a where we could kind of study what we wanted and dig into whatever text we wanted to dig into and ask whatever, kind of deal with the esoteric in a way that a lot of young people aren't afforded the opportunity to. And I'm always grateful for my mother for giving it bandwidth and the space to kind of bop around and figure out what feels right to us. But there was one thing she always sort of talked about, which was always sort of keep your mind on when you're 10 years old, that's a heavy weight, right? That's a heavy burden to sort of carry. What exactly am I here for? And so one day I told my mother that it was stressful, right? It's like, yo, how you want me to, how am I supposed to find this purpose? It feels so ephemeral, right? It feels so abstract. What does it mean? Be my purpose. And then all this heavy that I think we oftentimes strap to ourselves, our purposes. And my mother's response to me, which I will for, is, son, everybody's purpose is, and that was kind of like, wait, what? And she's stressed about it, because is exactly, every single human being's purpose is exactly the same, right? And what the purpose is, is service, period. To be of service. Now, the way that you enact that service, the way that you sort of bring that service into fruition, that's where things get a little complicated. That's where that's what you have to kind of figure. Never actually changes for mankind, right? If you want to tap into what it is, all you have to do is be of service in some way. It doesn't have to be big service. It could be small service, right? It could be any kind of service that you want. If you can tap into service, then you can tap into your purpose, right? And so as the world has changed over the last 2 months, what does that mean for me? I work as a writer, a novelist for a living, as some of you know, specifically for children. I serve as the National Ambassador of Young People's Literature, as some of you know, which is, and for those who don't know what that is, it's basically, it's a part of the laureate system. So there's the poet laureate, and then like the poet laureates for the poets, and I'm for children's literature. But right now, all of my travels, all of the lectures, all of my engagement has sort of ceased because of the quarantine. But it doesn't mean that my service has to stop, right? And so now I've had to pivot and figure out, how am I going to be of service in the midst of said quarantine? As long as I keep service at the forefront, then I can continue to enact my purpose, right? So now what I've done is I said, okay, well, look, let's figure out ways to tap into the imaginations, to Maggie's point, let's tap into the imaginations of our children. How do we do that? Well, because I can't leave the house, I'll have to figure out how to do it through technology, because it's all we have at this point. And for all the parents out there who've been so angry about technology, I bet we're all counting our blessings now, right? And so, honestly, and so one thing that I do every Tuesday and Thursday, I put out writing prompts. And not just any kind of writing prompts to young people to sort of fool around with, but prompts that are actually going to dig at who they are at the core. And before, by the way, before I get into all this, there's one more thing I want to say about service. You can't be of service if you can't be of service to yourself, right? So the first thing I have to do is make sure I serve me. So in the morning, I come upstairs and I sit in my office and I stare at my computer screen, because I still have to do my work as a writer, not because I have any necessary prescient deadlines on me or any sort of pressure to produce a new work. It's not that at all. Nobody has any pressure to produce anything, by the way. You ain't got to make nothing during this time if you don't feel like it, right? But for me and for people like me, I have to sit at the altar of my work every single day and pour myself into it, even if nothing comes. And it has to be like a meditation to me, because I am a person who is clinically anxious. And if I don't put my mind power somewhere, it's going to go somewhere else. And when it grows legs and walks into a cave that I can't get it out of, then I can't be of service to anyone, right? So for me, I show up, I pray at, this is my altar, right? The altar of my work. I sit there. Sometimes it's productive, sometimes it's not, but I put in my time, and then I go and serve myself by laying on the couch for 35 minutes and watching trash TV. Then I pick up my Nintendo Switch and do that for a little while, playing Mario Kart or Animal Crossing or whatever for another 45 minutes. Then I make a little lunch, right? Then I get on the internet, see what's happening on Twitter, see who's arguing it. What I never do is watch the news, by the way, because it does not serve me here, right? It does not serve me. And then after all of that, I figure out how I'm gonna serve these kids. And that's the way it has to go. And I shouldn't have to feel bad for that if the outcome is the babies still get fed, right? If that's the outcome, then I'm good with it. And if I'm still being of service to them because I've been of service to me, then can't nobody say nothing to me. Right? Now, I put out these prompts every Tuesday and Thursday. What are the prompts like? They're not just like, imagine yourself as a dog and all this nonsense. No, that's not what we're doing. Instead, what we're doing is, I want to say things like, for instance, last week we did a prompt that everyone has a prompt that says, if you could write a letter to your hero, what would you say? And my prompt is, if you could write a letter to your hero, what would your hero reply to you? And so then what you ended up having were all these young people writing letters to themselves from the voice of their heroes. And there's one young man named Lewis, who I'm so proud of. His mother sent me the letter, and it says, his letter came from Samuel L. Jackson. And it said, dear Lewis, I'm so proud you wrote me, because I also had a stutter when I was your age. And that stutter helped me sort of grow into the man I am. And so I know that one day you're going to grow into the man you want to be, and you're going to be a famous actor, even with the stutter. And you're going to figure out how to shift the face of the Black community, even with the stutter. And you're going to change the world, even with the stutter, right? Now, I take this thing and I'm crying because I'm so proud to see Lewis has written this thing. And I put it on the internet, and Sam Jackson replies to the kid. Right? Sam Jackson replies to the kid and says, Lewis, this is exactly what I would have said to you. Now, that's what I'm talking about. I just put out one yesterday. Yesterday's prompt was, imagine your parents when they were your age and write a profile of who you think they were based on what you know of them today, who you think they were when they were 13, 15, 10 years old. Now, if you're a good parent, what you're paying attention to is how your child sees you. Right? If you're a good parent, what's going to happen is your child is going to let you know exactly the way they see you and how their perspective of you has been skewed, not because of you, right? Because of your amnesia, but because of what you haven't told them, right? And so we get to have and so the prompts are rolling out every Tuesday and Thursday. It's stretching the imagination of our children, but more so than that, it's giving them an opportunity to get some of the inside stuff out. I also do a game, it'll be in a couple of hours every Friday called Brain Yoga, where I get on Instagram and I basically do a game with all the young people who show up on my Instagram, where I show them two different ideas. I say, or two different items, right? You say, here's a wristwatch, here's a pencil sharpener. You get 20 seconds to make it, to invent a new thing, a new creation based on these two things, 20 seconds. And then I let them come on my live and they go, oh, Mr. Jason, all right, so I would take the pencil sharpener and then I will break it apart, take the blade out, put it on the, right? Like it's this whole, and you get to watch our children's brains working in real time. And then I give them all $60 gift cards to independent bookstores, and it's a whole thing, right? The point I'm trying to make is this is how I'm tapping into my service, to my purpose, right? It has nothing to do with anything big. It's just everyday things that are small enough for me to impact somebody's life, because everybody's purpose is the same. Now, if you're not some writer, or you don't have a podcast, or you're not a famous artist, or all these other things that we get to represent, the truth of the matter is, all you gotta do is send a letter, a note on your neighbor's doorstep that says, I'm thinking about you, and you've tapped into your purpose. All you got to do is send a bag of groceries to the elders down the street who you know can't leave the house. It's going to cost you $40, right? And say, look, I've been thinking about you. I know y'all down here by yourself. That's it. All you have to do is sit on the porch, and when you see the lady walking by with a mask on trying to walk a dog, is say hello. Because we ain't spoke to nobody in a long time. You'd be surprised what you poured into that person. Simple acts of service and acts of greater purpose, no matter how hard you feel, like no matter how hard you're struggling to find said purpose or looking for the big things, or you can't go to your job, but you've always attached your purpose to. The truth of the matter is, job or no job, occupation or no occupation, your purpose never actually changes. Do something for somebody, do something for yourself, and we're all good in the purpose field. Simple as that for me. You can agree or disagree, but I promise you, it's easier to think about it this way, especially in trying times. I appreciate y'all. Love y'all daily. Be good to yourselves. Be good to your families. Be good to your children. And I'll see y'all when this nonsense is over.